I am live. It is Friday morning, and I shan't be reading tomorrow, I think, or Sunday. Therefore, I thought I'd put in an early chapter in the morning. The Winged Pharaoh, it's written by Joan Grant. It's an account of her memory of ancient Egypt. She had a life as Sikita, the daughter of Pharaoh. She is now co-ruling with her brother. This story, her life, plays before the flood and before Babylon, about 5,000 years after Atlantis fell. So that gives us a little bit of a time stamp. Chapter 6 of the 5th part of this book, coming towards the end, but there's still quite a little bit left. The Festival of Min. When the waters of the inundation had subsided and left the fields strong with new life for the sowing, the Festival of Min was celebrated to mark the opening of a new cycle of fertility. Nea and I drove to the temple of Atet in two-state chariots, followed by the nobles and the captains, and by the viziers in their carrying litters. I wore the white crown of the south, and Nea the red crown of the north. In the forecourt of the temple were 300 grain jars arranged in 30 rows of 10. In the days of my father, who had been a healer priest as well as Pharaoh, it was he that charged the first jar of grain with life. But now it was a high priest of Ptah, who by his will cause the plant spirits of the grain to spin strongly, so that the seed should thrust quickly from the soil and bear the crops for a rich harvest. The high priest went between the rows of jars, followed by 9 young healer priests. The first jar of each group he himself charged with the life of Ptah, while the young priests with him each charged another. After the safeguarding of the grain, the jars were loaded upon carts, each drawn by 3 white oxen, garlanded with flowers, their horns tipped with gold, and painted in green and scarlet. Then the statue of Min, in his semblance of creative man, was brought from the temple on a litter of wood covered with gold leaf. Nea and I led the procession, in which the statue was carried by 40 young priests round the royal boundaries of Man-Atet East. The owner of each field waited to receive the grain as we passed, and at once began sowing, so that behind the procession the grain scattered over the earth in a shower of gold. Our way was lined with people. There were children with goats and women with cages of ducks, and some had brought their cows, so that the shadow of Min should fall upon them, and they be fruitful. As the procession passed them, the people chanted the invocation to Min. Min, who took compassion on the loneliness of man and made him our first parents, give of your fertility to the land of calm. Let the earth receive the seed into her womb, and bring it forth beautiful in the sight of Ra. Let the branches of our fruit trees be strong to bear the harvest of our orchards. Let our vines jewel their leaves with amethysts. Let our bulls be lusty, so that our cows delight to give their milk. Let our goats bring forth twin kids, and the river hurry with fish. Let our ducks lead forth a fleet of chicks upon our pools, and the reeds whisper with wildfowl. May the land of calm be your dwelling place, so that you shall send those beloved of your heart to be our children. While the sun was still high, a festival banquet was held in the great hall of the palace. Nea and I, with nobles, viziers, and captains of captains, were seated on chairs of state at one end of the hall. In front of us the floor was clear, and at the other end of the hall the great entrance was hidden by a stretched white curtain, upon which many shadow scenes were enacted throughout the banquet. Bearers of tribute passed in procession, with the collars of gold and the tusks of ivory, with deer and small cattle slung by their feet on poles, and fruit piled high upon flat baskets, and young boys leading hunting dogs and tame leopards straining in leash, an ever-moving frieze of black and white. I wore a wreath of stephanotis flowers, and my pale green dress was embroidered in gold with ears of wheat, symbolizing the fresh young green the river water brings, soon to be gilded by the sun. Each bead of my rayed pectoral was carved as a different flower or fruit. Nea's clothes were blue, embroidered with fish and birds and deer, to symbolize the river from which animals draw their life upon beneath the moon. The other guests were ranged down each side of the banqueting hall. Beside each chair was a low table on which the food was set, and on every table there was a lotus flower. They sat with those to whom they wished to talk, some in little groups and some in pairs, and some sat alone, content to feast their eyes and stomach undisturbed. Some of the women wore plaited dresses of transparent linen, through which one could see their breasts and the pleasant curve of their bellies. For if a young girl's breasts are pleasing, it is well that they should be seen. Indeed, it would be as foolish to cover them as for a red-haired woman to wear a black wig. But foolish as it is to hide beauty, it is yet more foolish to show that which is no longer beautiful. While we ate, musicians played to us. The music they gave did not inflame, as do the chants of soldiers entering battle. Rather was it refreshing to the ear as it is water to a dusty garden. Reed pipes and flutes entwined with their melodies, with the ripple of harps cooling the air with their silver music, like clear water falling from a height in measured cadences. The vizier of the land of the hare, who was over 70, sat alone, for he liked the enjoyment of his food to be uninterrupted. His cooks were famous for their skills, and they blended subtleties of taste as a painting scribe ponders on his colors. To him the exact span of time that the oven must caress a quail for it to be worthy of his palate was as the length of each line of a poem is to a song-maker. To the right of the vizier, the wife of one of the captains of the royal bodyguard was sitting with her husband and another woman. I noticed that 3 times she beckoned to the serving girl, who carried a great bowl of honey-flavored cream in which were ripe dates and slices of orange dried to sweetness in the sun. I wondered how long it would be before she realized that sometimes a love for rich sweetmeats and for the wearing of transparent linen do not walk happily together. Patar Kifa sat at my right hand. He told me a very long story of how, when he was a little boy, he and his brother had been sailing to the north of Nektan, when the river was at flood. Their boat had struck a rock, and they had been stranded on an island for 3 days before their father found them. I didn't listen very closely, because I had heard it several times before. There was a long and deep friendship between us, and though often we would talk together and he would give me of his wisdom, he enjoyed far more to talk of the little things of earth. To him a childish adventure was more interesting to talk about than a great triumph over an evil one. To most people, life upon earth is their work, and the life of the spirit is their refreshment. But to great sandal-bearers such as Patokifa, the causeway to the gods is the road over which they carry their burdens, and earth is where they find their relaxation. There was a pleasant smell of the sunny warmth of fruit and the heavy sweetness of flowers. The serving girls, wearing tunics of grain linen and wreaths of young green wheat, went among the guests with platters of food. There were little birds wrapped in vine leaves and young gazelles, each roasted whole upon a silver spit, fresh dates served on a bed of smoking rice, and young corn, cut when the cob was at finger length, served with quails, each cooked with a fig inside it, which was my favorite dish. Sesket, the mother of Nea's son, was at the royal table. She spoke very little, and when she ate she reminded me of a gazelle drinking from a pool where it can scent a lioness. Her eyes were large and the lids clearly cut. They were soft, and as if she were timid as well as stupid. I wondered why Nea loved her. Perhaps his strength enjoyed her gentleness, like Nati, who allows a stable cat to share his stall. Another of the secondary wives was here, Tetap. I watched her eating grapes. As her brown fingers stretched out to take them from a dish, I thought of my monkey grabbing for a honeycomb. But I'm very fond of my monkey, and I thought I searched my heart. For Tetap I could find no trace of affection. Her eyes were bold and round as polished pebbles of onyx, When she saw me looking at her, she veiled them with her lids. Nea must have been sorry that he held her father in such honour, that he took his daughter into his household. Girls went among the guests with flat rush baskets, filled with wreaths of flowers, so that the women could choose fresh ones as those they wore wilted in the heat. The overseer of the watches of the river had emptied his goblet too often for wisdom, and when one of the girls passed him, he took a honeysuckle wreath and tried to put it on the head of the woman beside him. He was clumsy and disarranged her wig, and it showed the shaven hairline by which she had tried to heighten her forehead. He would be told that it is unwise to forget that the banqueting hall of Pharaoh is neither his own home or the wine-house of the garrison. Then young girls, naked and slender as reeds, danced the shadow dance of the north wind. First they stood quiet as a field of corn upon a still day, and muted drums murmured of the drowsy heat. Then the reed pipes whispered of the evening breeze, and the dancers' arms rippled like a breeze-stirred meadow when the grass is high. Then they moved gently, as leaves flutter with the first breathings of a storm. The wind strengthened to the melody of harps, and they swayed like papyrus bowing to the marsh. And as the music heralded the storm, they were like trees, whose branches clasped great winds and scattered their leaves, as tempest-driven offerings to the racing clouds. Thunder muttered to the surge of drums until it seemed that we were encompassed by a mighty storm, and as the music drifted into peace, the dancers' rhythm turned to gentleness. Then the music enfolded quietness, and they were still as trees upon a silent evening. Before the banquet ended, a toast was given, which had been written by the cupbearer of Name, who had saved his master from death through poison, and it was in his memory that it was given at this festival until this day. For the last time our alabaster goblets were filled with cool wine. Wine that is rare enough for Pharaoh's seal. Upon the stopper of its earthen jar, wine that is stored in deep-cut rooms of stone, where in the dark is slowly born this child, of clustering grapes and the hot summer sun. If this were used as is the people's drink, to be a barrier against thought or fear. If it were as if the flail in Pharaoh's hand should of its will lash him across the brow, or the young lion cub sleeping at his feet should tear his flesh and show the whitened bone. Let fools and cravens use this purple cloak to hide their burdens from their inward sight, but in it we drink to wisdom, courage, truth, downfall of enemies, and furtherance of the light. Wonderful. The next chapter is chapter 7, and it's got Dio in it again, and I shall read it when I have the opportunity, as I'm away for the weekend.